CEO Wisdom podcast with Dr. Arne Rubenstein today with us. I've been quite honored to speak to Arne so far. He's the CEO of the Rites of Passage Institute. He's basically turning boys into men, and that has been one of my favorite topics lately. Arne is visiting Oaxaca pretty soon, where I'm from. We're physically gonna meet. And I have a very good energy flow with Arne. I think he's living a life that could be ideal to my eyes. For example, he just came back from surfing today. He met with another successful CEO in the same field as him. And I think this is going to be a hell of an episode. So Dr. Rubenstein, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit more about the Rites of Passage Institute.
Sure, happy to. And thank you, Charles, for having me on your podcast. Very happy to be here. I am 59 years old. I'm a father of two young men. I have a few stepchildren and a bunch of adopted children, so quite a big spread out family. And yes, I am the CEO and founder of the Rites of Passage Institute. But before that, I was actually a doctor. First, I did 10 years in family medicine and then 15 years in emergency medicine. And one of the things that I really saw was that I basically came to the conclusion that the young people are trying to create their own rites of passage. They're trying to create their own initiations. And especially when I was in emergency medicine, I would see so many young boys and girls, or teenage boys and girls, who had done something in their cars or in a fight or in taking drugs or pregnancies or all sorts of things. And I realized that, they were trying to do the things of adults, but without any boundaries or understanding or support or supervision. And I worked out, over a long period of time, that they were trying to create their own rite of passage, and that every young person, boy or girl, is going to go through a rite of passage, just as we did. And that really the question is, are they going to create their own, or can we create something that's healthy and positive for them? Because I know that when they create their own, or when their peers create it for them, there is a significant risk that it could have disastrous lifelong consequences. So that's sort of an introduction as to why I got into this work.
I'm quite big on some contrarian problems that are not often mentioned in the media. And one of them, for example, is porn. Another is disinformation with big media. And another one is the lack of leadership. And leadership could be somewhat synonym with testosterone and being a man. Some people, when I think the right word, I shouldn't use the term man up. I use it sometimes, unfortunately, in my team with some of my employees. I think what I mean is like mature up. So mat up could be the better term there. But why do I think that this is a problem in our society? There's a bunch of other problems that this world is facing. But when I look at, for example, Putin and the Russian war, you can certainly see a little boy in this man's body that's trying to prove something to the world. So tell us about that fundamental problem. You saw it in the emergency room, but do you also believe this is a cause of this world not advancing as much as it could nowadays in our modern times?
Yeah, look, I'll go back a little bit. I saw it. I could see there was a problem. At first, I didn't know what it was. And then I related it back to my life and my period when I was a teenager, and also seeing how that what I did as a teenager affected me through my life. And that even when I was in my 20s and had two children, I was still in that teenager way of thinking. And so I had a young wife, and I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they were both in nappies. And, my wife would be at home looking after them, and I was off working. And on the way home, if I wanted to go to the gym or visit someone, I could do it. And then when I was 27, my wife, who was from Canada, for whatever reasons, we separated, and she went back to Canada and left me with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old in nappies. And that was when I had to grow up. That's when I had to, for the first time in my life, put someone else's needs in front of my own. And that was a big shock. And that was an incredibly challenging, but also very beautiful time, just having that, one-on-one, needing to look after my 2 boys. And that sort of changed my entire life. And I was working in emergency then, and I was seeing all these young people coming in, as I mentioned earlier, and not only boys and girls. And I saw how often alcohol or drugs was involved. And, I saw many girls who unfortunately had, I'll just name it, lost their virginity while they'd been drunk to someone who they hardly knew, and that they were going to regret that for the rest of their lives. And so the first thing was identifying the problem. And then actually I got involved in some men's work. I went away on a men's retreat for 4 days. And that was significant for me because there were nearly 100 men there. And I was astonished that all the men seemed to be dealing with the same 5 issues. And every man had 3, 4, or 5 of those issues, including me. And the first issue was unresolved stuff with their own fathers. That was the number one. Their fathers had never accepted them or acknowledged them or told them they loved them. And that there were all these men, and even older men, still trying to prove something to a father, even if that father had been dead for 20 years. And in their strive for success and acknowledgement, they would often sort of abandon their own families to try and get that. So that was the number one, stuff with their fathers. The second issue I saw the men struggling with what am I doing with my life? What am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And if there's one thing I know, what I'm currently doing is not what I'm supposed to be doing, not what I want to be doing. The job, the lifestyle, I'm on the wrong train, but I don't know how to get off the train. And I don't even know which train I should be on. So that was the second thing. The third is, even though I'm in a man's body, I still feel like a boy. So when am I going to really feel like I am a man? That was a big one. The fourth one was, how in the world do I be in a healthy relationship? I never got taught to be how to be in a relationship. The role modeling wasn't great. I have no mentoring around it. What does it mean to be in a healthy relationship? And then the fifth one I saw the men struggling with was, if I'm a father, how do I be a good father? What's it actually mean to be a good father? So all the men had that, dealing with their own fathers. What am I supposed to be doing with my life? When am I going to feel like a man? How do I be in a relationship in a good way? And how do I be a good father? And someone said, imagine if there'd been something for us when we were teenagers around all of this. Our lives could have been very different. And it was the first time I heard about rites of passage, or someone mentioned the word rites of passage. And I became very interested in the work. And actually, not long after this men's program, they decided to put on a program for boys and men. And we ran, and I got invited to help run that. And we took 27 boys, and some of them came with their fathers, and some came with mentors or family friends. And we took 27 men and boys out in the bush for 3 days and 3 nights. And something happened. Something profound happened. And after that, I started studying rites of passage all over the world. And what I was astonished to find was that every traditional and indigenous community would have created a rite of passage for their boys as they were becoming young men, and for their girls as they were becoming young women. And what really interested me is that they all would do it in basically the same way. They would have the same stages. And then within those stages, they would have the same elements. And it would vary. The way it was presented would vary depending on what part of the world it was in, but it would still actually fundamentally be the same thing. And so I was like, okay, well, if they all did it and they all did it in the same way, if we understand those stages and elements, we could do that now in a modern context appropriate for this community. So I started running some rites of passage, and this is like 30 years ago in the area where I lived, and taking boys and men out on programs. And you know, I just knew this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I ended up leaving my medical practice and moving full-time into this work. And I still say I'm a doctor, except now instead of doing curative medicine in the system, I now do preventative medicine out of the system, which I much prefer. And we do it for boys and girls. And our thing is about, you know, can we bring rites of passage back into the mainstream again? Can we get to a point where every boy and girl has an opportunity to go through a healthy rite of passage? Because as I've already said, you know, they're all going to go through one, but most of the ones that I saw people going through and that I went through myself were really sort of traumatic and not ideal. And then if I can keep going, that if we look at that fundamental shift from boy to young man, girl to young woman, child to adult, why is that even so important? And I actually wrote a model nearly 30 years ago about the difference between boy behavior and healthy man behavior, which has now been extended to girl behavior, woman behavior, child, adult. But if we look at the boy man, because it's such a beautiful way of understanding it, boy behavior is what we typically see in a 6 to 10-year-old boy. So boy behavior is, I'm the center of the universe. You know, look at me. I want acknowledgement. A boy just wants power, as much power as he can get. A boy doesn't take any responsibility for his actions. If something bad happens, it was someone else's fault. A boy can't control his emotions. If he doesn't get what he wants, he has a temper tantrum. You know, I saw a kid yesterday in the supermarket screaming and screaming. You know, you could hear him from the other side of the supermarket. And he's going, I want a lollipop. You know, he wanted a candy. And you know, it was kind of cute because he's 4 years old and he's saying, Mummy, I hate you. I hate you. You're the worst mummy in the world. I want a lollipop. And it was, you know, but that's a 4-year-old. Boy behavior is, I'm going to live forever. And the final one of boy behavior is a boy wants a mother. A boy wants a mother to do everything for him, to basically be his servant, tell him how wonderful he is, know everything about him. And that's boy behavior. Now, in a 6 to 10-year-old, 4 to 10-year-old, that's actually normal. It is normal. But if that never gets shifted and we end up with 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, world leaders who still think they're the center of the universe, who still just want more and more power, who still think they're going to live forever, you know, who can't handle their emotions. So if a boy has a temper tantrum because he doesn't get a lollipop, that's one thing. But if a grown man has a temper tantrum when he doesn't get his lollipop, that's actually domestic violence. And that's a big issue. And you know, if a grown man thinks he's going to live forever and wants a mother instead of actually a relationship, which is what we are seeing more and more, you can see how a lot of I believe the problems that we see are because we actually still have an adolescent society. And the traditional communities recognize we can't have children running our communities, or it'll be a disaster. If we do, those children will just take and take and take. They'll use up all the resources. They won't think about the future. They'll just think about themselves. You know, they'll fight each other. They'll do all the things that we're seeing in the world. So the model of healthy man behavior is, I'm not the center of the universe. I'm part of a community and my actions affect others. And I need to know that. Man behavior is not about having more power for me. Man behavior is, if I have more power, that actually means I can do more good in the community. Man behavior is, you know, I have to be able to stand with my emotions. I'm allowed to be angry or upset, but I'm not allowed to abuse or verbally, physically threaten people. That's not okay. Man behavior, healthy man behavior is knowing that one day I'm going to die, and that affects how I live my life. And it's not about having a mother, it's about actually looking for genuine relationships, whether, whoever I'm with. And that's a big difference. And if you think about it, if we had a society, if we had, if men, were actually men rather than boys, and, if there are any women listening to this podcast, and hopefully there are lots, and I would ask the women who are listening the question, do you know any men who still act as boys, thinking they're the center of the universe, want power, don't take responsibility for their actions, can't handle their emotions, and are looking for a mother? A lot of women will know exactly what I'm talking about.
Wow. Lots to unpack. I could somewhat identify myself in some of these behaviors, which is interesting. The living forever thing is quite interesting because I've had an obsession with longevity for quite a while, and I really don't intend to die. The power thing, I intend to amass power and use it for good. So that's also like a weird theory that I have. It's not just power for the sake of power. And to me, the definition of being a man is kind of being a leader, going at hunt and bringing back the goods to the community and sacrificing yourself. Indeed, there's accountability in there. But yeah, it's kind of this prehistoric definition, of go getting something, bringing it back to the house and feeding the whole community. What do you have to think about these points?
Sure. Look, I mean, the first thing I'd say is one of the big differences between being a boy and a man is we have more awareness. So I know I can be in all of those boy behaviors and I can be in all of the man behaviors. But as a man, I have awareness, and more I know when I'm being a boy. I know when I'm wanting my partner to be my mother rather than in real relationship. I know when I'm just thinking about myself. And because of awareness, it gives us choice. So my aim is to be spending more time in the man behavior and less time in the boy behavior. And it doesn't mean I can't have fun and I can't laugh and I can't be silly, but it's about knowing when it's okay to have fun and laugh and be silly, and when I actually need, in a serious situation, to be really focused and present and, doing what needs to be done. Look, the living forever thing, that's a whole really interesting discussion as well. And I don't know if we want to go into there right now. I can, but
No need. No need.
for me, it's about living well. And as a 59-year-old man entering elderhood, and the grand prize at the end of elderhood is death, I look at death in a different way now than I would have looked at death when I was 20, 30 or 40.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, okay, I'm going to say something weird here, but if there is such a thing as AGI and general artificial intelligence, I think past, future, and presents are cracked, meaning that immortality is already cracked and there's no really such thing as death. I talked about that on a pod yesterday, and I mean, there's various philosophical definitions of death, and we could get into consciousness. No need to do that today. But to your point, I think that when we see yellow-haired world leaders getting at the top and trying to even get more resources than what they already had, when they probably have 1,000x of what they really need, and they're still striving for power and trying to reach something that they will never be able to reach, and constantly not being happy with their current lives. That is the problem. That is
I'll tell you one thing. If you studied these incredibly powerful men, and I've sort of done my own personal research on it, that not every one of them, but many, many of them, if you look at the relationship they had with their own father, you will see that there's an issue there. And that's this not having been acknowledged, not having been accepted. there'll be something in their past very often that was never dealt with. And so now unconsciously, they are trying to resolve something, but because it's unconscious, it's an insatiable need. And so, yes, of course, they're just going to be wanting more power, more personal, everything.
How can they get more conscious?
Well,
at this stage, is it like something
okay, I'll tell
already
you.
solidified in their brain and really hard to break?
There's a yes and a no. If we look at the stages of a rite of passage, there are 3 key stages of a rite of passage. The first is separation. So you have to take them away from their day-to-day environment. You can't do a rite of passage, when a person's at home, at work, at school. You have to take them away. So, and this would apply to any, man, woman, person. If you can actually, the first is to genuinely separate them from their day-to-day environment. And you go into what's called a container, a place where you don't have your phone, you don't have contact. So it goes into a place of self-reflection. The second thing I would do is actually get people just sharing their story, looking at and ideally going to a vulnerable place. You get people in a circle, and because I've done it 10,000 times, and ask them to share about what their life was like when they were 14, 15, 16. What was it like at home? What was their relationship like with their father, their mother, particularly their father, to be honest, but also mothers. And all of a sudden, these people, no matter how powerful they are, no matter how much money they've got, no matter, if you create an environment where they'll genuinely share, all of a sudden, it opens up a whole nother world of what's actually going on here. Because it's those events and those relationships we have before we're sort of 15, 16, 17 that shape the rest of our lives. So we actually need to go back to that place and look at, what do I believe now that I believed then, but it's no longer relevant. If my father told me I wasn't good enough, or I'd never be good enough, and my father's been dead for 30 years, and here I am, the hugely successful something or other, I don't need to run around believing that I'll never be good enough. This is actually a time for me to stop and look at what I actually have done and who I actually am. So that's the rite of passage model. And if I just go through the 3 stages, the first stage is separation. The second stage is a transformation, where we change, because that's what we're interested in. How do you transform? Because if you don't transform, nothing changes. And the third stage is integration back into the community in a different place. So, I look at life, it's like a staircase, and we're moving up the staircase, and each step is a different stage in life. And traditionally, rites of passage were used to move us from one step to the next. And those rites of passage would be created by the community, or sometimes life creates them. So if we get married, if we have a child, if someone close to us dies, if we have a serious illness, a big accident, all of those they're a rite of passage that move us from one stage to the next. The ones that life create are often not facilitated and managed, so they may or may not have a good outcome. Or we can have facilitated rites of passage that help us to move, which ideally do have a good outcome. So we have to go through this, we're talking about a transformation, and we will go through transformations in life. And the big thing that will transform is our belief systems. It's how we view life. It's our underlying subconscious beliefs and values. So you have a set of beliefs and values, Charles, and they are in your subconscious, and they run your life. They decide everything you do. They decide who you spend time talking to, what work you do, what exercise you do, what food you eat, what relationship you're in, what movies you go and see, all of those things. Now, if you look at your subconscious when you were 6 years old, it would be different from what it is now. So at 6 years old, you possibly wanted to spend all your time with your mum, preferably, or your dad or something. And very possibly, cartoons and particular movies were your favorite, and you would like to have eaten a lot of sweet things, and, play was really important. Now, at nearly 30, you've got a different set of beliefs and values that drive what you do. And for me, at nearly 60, I have a different set of beliefs and values again. And my father at 93, he has a different set of beliefs and values. So what is changing is something in our psyche. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
And so what are the big thing is, what are the elements that have to be in the transformational stage for this, for an actual transformation to occur? And that's what I've studied, and that's what I teach and talk about, and that's what my real interest is, the key elements there.
Right. The mental model that I had while listening to you is kind of the base of my brain. It's kind of the underlying iceberg.
Yeah.
Which is it from a chronological point of view? Is it that the brain was forming during these times, and it's really hard to go back and kind of separate or dissipate the connections that were made? On my side, I've done a lot of journeys and always had spirituality at the back of my mind. I think a lot of business people do not give even 1 second of attention to these kinds of things. It's kind of Mr. T mentioning that he doesn't work out on a daily basis because all the energy is spent doing business. The question I had is, like, why are these people elected? Or why do, for example, women choose this type of man that has a facade? And just today I wrote something in business, there's a lot of vanity. I see a lot of my competitors claiming to be something, and with time I just see the fog dissipating, and I see the vanity dissipating, and I see the real thing that they're doing, and that it doesn't scale. They're all about short term. So is there a cover up in these men? Do they compensate with what they're not, with like persuasion and fakeness?
Of course they do. So there are two. If we're going to use the iceberg model, there are two key things that shape what is contained in our iceberg. What's the part below the ocean that you don't see? So there are two things that mix in together. The first is just the natural stages of life. So a baby naturally thinks differently to a child, who naturally thinks differently to a teenager who's starting to switch onto the world and sexuality and everything. And that teenager naturally thinks differently to, someone who's a parent with their own children and a grandparent and an elder. So that's the first. But the second that comes into that is the events that happen to that person along the way. So, if I'm a child or a teenager, and someone says something to me, good or bad, that can get into my psyche, my iceberg. Someone might say to me, "Oh, you'll never be any good," and I believe it. Or someone might say to me, "Oh, you're ugly," and I'll believe it. Or someone might say to me, "You can do anything you want if you try hard enough," and I'll believe it. Or they may say to me, "You're a really good, beautiful, kind person," and I'll believe it. So all of that stuff is also in my below the surface. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that get said or that get taken in are not the really good ones. So we've got that mix. We've got the actual, age and stage mixed in with the events. Or, a person gets abused when they're a child, and often they'll believe it's their fault, and that abuse will affect how they act for the rest of their lives. And it can come out in really, really unhealthy ways. So there's all of those things mixed in there. So when you do a rite of passage, in that transformation stage, something really interesting happens. And you call it an iceberg. I'd rather call it a box, if you don't mind, a box which contains all of our beliefs and values. And in a rite of passage, in that transformation stage, this box, which is normally closed, actually opens. And we can move some of our beliefs and values, or we can even just at least see them. Because a lot of the time we don't even know they're in there. And we also have an opportunity for new ones to come in. So in a rite of passage, there's a period of time, there's an opportunity to review and work with our story.
I have a technical question for you that I've asked many folks out there. Hope I can get somewhat of you to take a risk and answer that one. But what percent of the population do you estimate are still boys trapped in men's body? And what percentage of highly powerful people, let's take billionaires, for example, are boys trapped in men's body?
High. A high percentage.
Like 80% on both?
A high percentage. And the reason why is because they actually never went through a rite of passage. Because if you don't go through the rite of passage and you don't transform, then your box can take those same values right through your life. And this is an interesting thing when you look at the difference between men and women. And these are generalizations, but it's worth considering. There are some natural rites of passage that women go through. So menstruation is a natural rite of passage that gets women in touch with something that men don't get in touch with in the same way. And for the women who do have a child, they unquestionably, that is a rite of passage where they have to put someone else in front of themselves. They have to care for someone else. They have to be present 24/7 for years. Men don't naturally go through that. Now, some do, and some will be single father and all this, but there's a lot of men who, even though they have a child and they're responsible, those men are still out drinking on a regular occasion. Those men are looking for other women because their woman has put on weight and doesn't seem to be as attractive to them, and she's got a crying baby and she's tired. And so instead of being home supporting her because she's sacrificing her body for the child, somehow in their brain, that man feels justified to go out and try and have sex with other women. So, that is a classic example of an uninitiated man with an initiated woman. Now, men do go through certain forms of rites of passage at time, but often for the man, the rite of passage doesn't happen until they're 40, 50, 60 years of age, when their wife leaves them, or when they lose their job, or when their parents die, or when something, or they get sick, or something happens to them. So, in my experience, in my work, the loss of rites of passage, as for the teenagers, is the greatest disaster that's happening in our society. And it does affect women. So when women don't, yes, they have these events, but if they don't go through a rite of passage, the danger is they stay in girl psychology.
Which is?
And the girl psychology has similarities to boy psychology, but couple of the big ones in girl psychology is that girl behavior is, I need validation. I need people to tell me how pretty I am, how sexy I am, how good I am. It's so that the validation, typical validation that a girl gets is from the outside world, whereas hopefully woman psychology is that I get the validation from inside because I know who I am. And it's not about having to dress up so other people will notice me, look at me, tell me. It's actually, I know who I am. And another element of girl behavior as opposed to woman behavior is that girls only care and look after themselves, or only care and look after others. That's girl behavior. Whereas healthy woman behavior is balancing care for self and care for others.
Love it.
And a girl is looking for a man or a hero person who's going to save them
A
and
father.
rescue them and look up, do everything for them. Whereas healthy woman is, hey, we're in relationship, we do this together. So, and then if you look at the sort of the consequences of all of this, where because we're basically an uninitiated society, instead of functioning as a community where we're looking after each other, it becomes about looking after me. Straight away, there's a problem there. And also, if I look at that staircase model, everybody wants to be down the bottom of the staircase. We worship youth and young, forever young. I want to be forever young. That person should be put in jail. That song is ridiculous. So instead of we're in a traditional Indigenous society, the elders get the most respect. In our community, we, kick the elders. We reject the elders and we worship the young, pretty, handsome ones who are not developed in here.
But the thing is, the elders either are not wise in our society because there's been a lack of rite of passage.
Correct.
Sometimes I listen to 85
Correct.
years old tell me stuff, and I'm like, like
that's
no,
right. That's exactly right. So the whole thing has sort of been switched around and is out of, look, one of the things in our work is we need to bring back elders. And on a personal level, as I'm reaching 60, I'm moving into elderhood. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking, what does it mean to be an elder? How do I be a good elder? Because we need, and I see there's this hunger in the young ones for good elders. Like I have young, 20, 30-year-olds almost climbing on me. Like, can we spend time with you? Can we listen to you? Can we talk to you? Can we tell you our ideas? Can we get advice? Can we, they want it. But there are very few elders who actually, we have older people rather than elders. And a lot of those older people are still off, trying to build empires and be powerful and hold on to their youth rather than accepting that they're getting older and, sorry to say, but they're also going to die.
Or even worse, their brain has been molded to the 9 to 5. I think the Industrial Revolution has been one of the worst things ever, in which some power hungry folks have almost put to slaves, workers became slaves. Nowadays, the 9 to 5 is really hammering people's brain and converting it into jelly. Yes, sir, I will do that. Yes, I will punch in and I will punch out. And that's not creating leaders, it's creating robots. And that's what I see in some of the 80, 85 years old,
Yeah, and the elders will hold down the young and stop the young developing so they can hold on to their own power.
Right. I see that a lot in my native Quebec. We call it small bread, or cutting the tallest blade of grass. It's always, don't strive to do more.
Yeah.
Don't do that. It's like this jealousy, right? I've been through that, and it's like crab in the bucket mentality. And that's one of the saddest thing.
So when we run a program, we always make sure we have multi-generations there. So you have the young ones who are looking to the world and what they're going to do with their lives. We have the ones who are in positions of power in the middle, and it's about how am I going to use my power wisely? And we have the elders, and we give the elders respect and challenge the elders around how are they going to pass on their knowledge and support and mentor and give their wisdom to the next generations who are coming through.
And I've seen the mentorship issue myself. I've sought mentor for quite a while. I never got any of them, or rare ones. First, I don't think the mentorship model is good. I think it needs to be win-win, you know? So I teach you something, you teach me something. So in that sense, I do have a lot of mentors. I don't believe in the, oh, you, it's like unilateral. You teach me everything and there's nothing for you.
No, Charles, it's
Yeah.
not like that. It's not like that. When you're in a good mentoring relationship, it is as valuable for the mentor
Right.
as it is for the mentee. But
Right.
it's not I give you and you give me.
Right.
When you truly mentor, the actual giving is the reward.
Also, yes.
You know, it's because I've been mentored by very good mentors, and I do mentoring myself. And it's a bit like, you know, I spoke about stories in a rite of passage and how it's different in different cultures, and it's also different at different ages. So for the young, they need to hear the stories, because that's how the young pick up knowledge and wisdom instead of being told how to live their lives, because when that happens, they just shut down. But when when the elders share their stories, then the young listen, and then the young have the choice to say, I'm going to do it exactly like you did, or I'm going to do it the opposite because clearly it didn't work and that's not how I want to do it. So that's how the young learn. So for the young, they need to hear stories. The elders need to tell stories. We need to get our stories out. And so that the reward for the elders, whereas the reward for the young is the gaining of knowledge and wisdom, the reward for the elders is just getting their stories out and having someone listen to them. So, you know, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. I've got some personal advice to ask you, Arne. So as you know, you and I, you specifically have a ceremony planned for Saturday here in Oaxaca. You've listened to me pre-call, and is it like me giving out excuses? Is me avoiding something that could be highly beneficial for me, this ceremony that I could go through? Because I feel that the stars are aligning. I've seen stars kind of disalign earlier this week with the puppies that I'm taking care of, with the stomach ache that I had today, which is odd, you know, or maybe that might even be a reflex of my body fearing something. So what do you think? Do you think I should do it? Because a good part of me feels like I should jump into this. It's a lifetime opportunity, but
such a great question.
Yes.
and the trap that I have to avoid here is telling you what to do, by the way, and giving you the answer. You have to make up your decision. And this is the thing around moving into adulthood and manhood. So on the one hand, you have this ceremony that would be amazing and exciting, and you'd get insights and, you know, all the fabulous benefits you've got. On the other hand, at this moment in your life, you have some responsibilities. You have additional responsibilities. You have puppies to take care of. You have a partner who you're going to get married to. You know, you have things going on. So it becomes about looking at those things and making a wise decision. And very probably it's not just your decision to make, because you also need to speak to your partner and say, hey, if I'm gone for 24, 48 hours, are you going to be okay looking after these puppies? Are the puppies going to be okay?
I got the green light on that level. So that the green light, but yeah.
Okay, so that's part of it. And then there's like, do I go with my intuition, and how well do I, you know, which parts of it do I look at? And so it is about balancing things. And one of the things that I learned, I actually won a scholarship to Harvard University, and they would say it's not about right or wrong, it's just consequences. You know, if you go to this ceremony, you'll get something fantastic out of it. Is what's over here going to be okay? And is now the right time to do it? And only you and your partner, you know, only you know, with others can work that answer out. And if you don't go, you'll gain something just by the fact of having been there and taken responsibility and looked after the puppies. And if you do go, you gain something different. And out of all of that, you have to work out what you do. And this won't be the last ceremony probably that is, you know, on offer. And it won't be the last time that you'll have responsibilities that you know, may or may not have to deal with this weekend. And with all of that,
or meet with Arne, like that's a special opportunity right there. Because as you mentioned, like me, I've always sought folks like you know, like mentors like you. So but I will. So first, there's always this fear in my gut when I come to do psychedelics, because it's like that ego death, like that disconnection with. And I told you that when I did breath work and all these other psychedelic trips, which are usually they're super good. Yes, there's some low moments, but they're always wonderful. There's that fear, but I think also, yeah, there's the sleep that I didn't get a lot with the puppies, and yeah, doing this at night. And finally, which I think really kind of solidifies my decision. So that was first, it was a gut decision, but second,
Hang on, before you
yeah,
tell me your decision, I'll
yeah,
just tell you one thing as an elder.
okay.
I will support you in whatever you decide to do.
Thank you for that. The last thing that solidifies the decision is one thing that I have not been doing post ceremony enough, which is take time and digest the insights from these ceremonies. Because let's say that, and I haven't done that with
Integration. It's the third stage of the
integration.
rite of passage. Integration. It's
Yeah,
the hardest and the worst done. And the greater the experience that we have, if we don't integrate it properly, the greater the potential for wounding and disappointment.
right. And I haven't done that in my last Vipassana retreat. I haven't done it well with my last psychedelics experience. So that has been a lesson. And let's say that, yeah, we're done by like 9 a.m. in the morning on Sunday, then I have to jump in straight with the puppies, the wedding, and all of that. I won't be fully there mentally as well. So yeah, sometimes in life, it's like these hard decisions. You really want something, and I think that's maturity right there. Because the old Charles, and I was reflecting on that lately. Like for example, I haven't completed a 15-kilometer that I set for myself the other day. I mean, I run tons of kilometers, but yeah, didn't do that time. Then I canceled an endurance events, and the immature Charles would be like, yeah, you're pussy, you're not like completing those events you set for yourself. But I think that might be a glimpse at the more mature Charles, that learns to say no to 160-kilometer ultra, not even before doing an 80-kilometer ultra, which I completed last year. But what do you think about that?
I think probably someone told you when you were young that you were a pussy, or there's something that came up in your educational system that told you being a pussy is the worst thing in the world. But there will be something in there. And actually, you shouldn't be basing your decision to do an ultra or anything on the fact of you thinking you're a pussy or someone seeing you as a pussy. You should be basing on is this the right thing to do now for me and my community? And that's it.
Right. Last question for you before we go. Toxic masculinity. You've seen these guys like Andrew Tate, like unfortunately mentoring some youth. The youth
A
needs
lot of you.
mentorship. Yeah. What do you have to say about that?
It's uninitiated again. It's exactly that. It's uninitiated. And it's also the youth don't have anyone to mentor them. And so when there's someone who stands up and says, hey, get as much money as you can, have as much wealth as you can, be with as many women as you can, live like me. And the boys who watch it see a big boy and go, yeah, I want to be like the big boy. That's not what I would hope we aspire to, but it's the sort of the ultimate example of an adolescent society that is putting adolescents up on a pedestal and saying this is who we all want to be.
Coming
And
back
yes, it's
to
toxic.
coming back to my first point about marketing and vanity, I think there's a real problem in this society of people that claim to be something, right? And marketing being good. I think marketing has crossed the line since some time, and algorithms feeding and adding gasoline on this fire to promote and to put this face at the forefront of what people see on their phone. That is really a challenging problem for society, which I intend to tackle. Arne, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. We're going to meet in Oaxaca, and that's another reason why, I'm good with skipping the ceremony, because I'll ask you about your feedback there. I'm certain also that we'll stay in touch, you know, like you most as a mentor. Really honored to have got to do this interview with you. Where can people find out more about you?
The best place, well, first of all, thank you, Charles. I really enjoyed speaking to you. And we could easily have gone for about another 2 days, I reckon.
Right.
But anyway, I do run 3-day Rites of Passage leadership trainings, which we get an opportunity to really explore these stages and elements and understand them. And the best place to find me is through my website, which is the ritesofpassageinstitute.org. Rites spelled RITES, Rites of Passage Institute. And .org. We that talks about the programs that we do and the trainings that we do, and we've got programs we've helped set up in more than 25 countries around the world, and we've got online trainings and resources and different things going on. So really encourage people to go there, and also very much that we work with boys, girls, and people of any gender. So yeah, that's the best place to find us.